We're going to look at the practice page for section 4.1. We're going to look at this diagram and identify the pair of segments as either parallel, skew, or intersecting. In this first one, notice how both segments have an F. That means they touch at F, so they intersect. If you look at the diagram, segment AF and segment BF definitely intersect. Number 2, segment AE and segment FD. They're both on the floor and they don't touch each other. That's parallel. Number 3, segment AB and segment FD. They don't touch each other. They're not parallel either. They're in different planes. These are skew lines. We're going to use a different diagram. We want all segments that are parallel to segment GI. So here's segment GI, it's vertical. The other 3 vertical ones are going to be parallel to it. So that would be segment HJ, segment NL, segment MK. Number 11, all segments skew to segment HJ. So I'm going to color segment HJ red. So I am not going to count the ones that touch it. They can't be skewed to it. So what touches segment HJ? Those 2 and those 2. Which segments are parallel to segment HJ? These 3 vertical ones. So the ones that are left over, those are the ones that are skewed to it. That would be this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Those green segments don't touch it. And those green segments are not parallel to it. So we're going to name those 4 segments. Segment GM, segment MN, segment LK, and segment KI, we'll call it. Let's use a different diagram. This is a pyramid. Name all of the pairs of parallel segments. Now, that could be a lot of work. If you want to just name a few, that's fine. But there are probably a lot to name. Maybe not in this picture, but in other pictures you could have a lot that are parallel. So I'm going to start with segment AB. What segment is parallel to segment AB? Segment DC is. Those are parallel segments. Segment AD is parallel to segment BC. They don't touch and they're in the same plane. Now, if you start looking at these segments, notice how this segment here touches these ones down here, and it also touches all the ones that come up to point E. So this one doesn't touch this one, but they're in different planes. So those would be an example of skew segments. So you want pairs of skew segments, segment EA and segment DC would be a good example. And obviously there's many, many more. We'll skip down to number 16. Draw and label a figure to illustrate each pair. Segments that are not parallel or skew. Well, if they're not parallel or skew, that means they're going to intersect. And that's all you really had to do. You want to put some points here, you could. If you want to name them, you can as well. Intersecting congruent segments. Here's 2 segments that are intersecting. How do I know they're congruent? Well, remember, if I put matching slash marks on them, they would be congruent. So these intersect, and they're congruent at the same time. Number 18, we want skew rays. Now that's really, really hard to draw on a 2-dimensional piece of paper because this piece of paper is a plane. And if you draw 2 rays on this plane, then they're on the same plane. So if you want to draw things that are skew, you almost need to identify skew things from a three-dimensional figure. So I'm going to go with that ray, and then I'm going to go with that ray. Notice how the diagram, or the solid figure, gives it a three-dimensional feel. If I just drew these two blue rays, it would look like they're intersecting.